So, Jonathan, it's great to see you today.
It's fantastic to be here, Jason.
So, Jonathan, you and I both have been following the Russian economy very carefully, and there's more and more indicators that things are going very badly for Vladimir Putin. We've seen that just in the past few weeks, 13 out of the top 79 biggest businesses in Russia have been unable to service their debts. We've seen that there's been a 70% increase in the number of people that are delinquent on their credit cards. In fact, almost 12% of all Russians are not able to pay their credit cards and are overdue by more than 90 days. The overall situation in Russia looks quite harsh, and I don't see the economy getting better. But recently, you did a really great video on your YouTube channel talking about what is going on in the Russian economy. What do you think is going on?
I think this we're in a race to the bottom. So it's not clear whether we're going to have a banking collapse first or whether we're going to have a property industry collapse. Because you talked about the crunch on personal credit. You've also got a crunch on various types of business credit, and various industries are in a parlor state, including aviation as well. Aviation is also being hit by Ukraine's attempts to sort of shut down airports with drone strikes as well, or the threat of drone strikes. So the question is what's going to go first, not whether something's going to go, but which industry is going to go ping first, and then maybe start a domino effect. I think Ukraine's strategy, and rightly so, is split between the military strategy, but also, crucially, putting further pressure on the Russian economy. The European strategy, I think, is still holding in there with sanctions, although they could be tightening it, they could be closing some of the gaps. The US seems to have lifted its boot off Putin's windpipe, which is regrettable. But I'm not sure Trump can sort of save the Russian economy. Now, this video and the video I produced is going to get a bunch of troll comments saying, you're just propagandists making stuff up. But the pessimism you're talking about the economy, the figures and stats, many of Russia's leading economists, including ones who are actually affiliated with the state organizations, were saying these exact things themselves at the Petersburg Economic Forum. So don't take our word for it. Go and listen to Russian bankers themselves. They are talking about an economic meltdown. They're talking about stagnation. They're talking about recession. And they're openly talking about which industries are going to go to the wall.
It's no, it is actually incredibly bad. And for people to think that it's not is insane. What's very funny is people often cite the IMF as saying that there's growth in the Russian economy. That ignores the fact that Russia self-reports its economic data to the IMF. It does not publish the raw numbers. And the IMF is not in the business of doing audits. It takes you at your word. It reports what you say you had. But with the St. Peter's Economic Forum, which you just cited, we had the head of the central bank, Nabulina, who said that they've run out of the reserves that they had they used to pad them when the sanctions came down. They had the Minister of Economics say the same thing. He said that very clearly Russia might be entering into a recession. We had the finance minister say a very similar thing. He said that Russia is going through a cold spell. And even Vladimir Putin has been forced now to address the economy. And ultimately, though, when I look at this, I really do think, and I sincerely believe this is not because I like Ukraine, don't like Ukraine. It's because look at the numbers yourself. They have a massive problem. About 20% of banks have significant problems with liquidity. And when we look historically what that means, that's how bank runs start. So when one bank tumbles, it has what they call the cascading effect, as you know, which is systemic failure. One leads to the next one failing, which leads to the next one failing. Hence why they're putting now restrictions on people taking out their money. You can only take out about 550 euros a day. At the same time, the banks now have more grace given to them by the government of being able to deny you your money. If they feel that there's been fraud or whatever other excuse they have, they can do that. But really, it's just to buy time. It gives a 48-hour period, a grace period, to the banks to deny you your money. And the real objective is they want to prevent bank runs. And that's a way that you can prevent them. But I see the whole situation as such that Russia's regime is ultimately collapsing in slow motion, but it's collapsing. Ultimately, the war against Ukraine has backfired. And this is what Putin, I think, really fears. Putin knows that he will lose. He knows that his regime is on very thin ice. And if this continues, it really could come tumbling down in a very rapid manner. But that's perhaps part of the reason that he wants talks. But what do you think?
We'll come to talks because I don't think he wants talks. I think there's a certain amount of despair there because whether it is the so-called oligarch class whether it is the central banks we're talking about, they'll understand that this is unsustainable from a fiscal standpoint. They'll understand the amounts of money that are being paid for sign-up bonuses in the poorer regions of Russia. They understand that more money has been pumped into the Russian regions maybe than any other time in history. It's changed the dynamic and it's created an expectation that that will last forever. In some of Russia's poorest regions, where the demand or the inflation for these military bonuses has grown furthest, you're actually seeing something in the region of $30,000 sign up bonus. That is 3 years' annual salary of the higher paid people in those oblasts. So this is insane. They are getting contracts for around 30 to 45,000 new servicemen a month, and at the upper rate, paying one-off bonuses of 30,000. Something in the region of sort of 20 to 30,000 of those are dying per month. And then you have another lump sum payment. All this money is flowing into the regions, and it is entirely unsustainable. Now, what's Putin going to do? He's announced that various social programs and various infrastructure programs are going to be cut. But he has almost a fixed ballooning military expenditure. If he starts to cut that, his war is over. Um, and you could see a rapid disintegration of the Russian forces on the front, a rapid rolling back of any territory that they've been incrementally taking. This is why I find it so sort of curious that you have even some very well regarded analysts talking about Putin being able to extend this war to the end of this year, to the end of next year, to the end of 2027. The economic figures that we're talking about do not seem to support any such fantastical notion. And again, I worry that we're looking at Russia as something that's completely exceptional, that somehow it has infinite people, infinite resources, that it can never fall, it can never fail. Well, I'm sorry, that defies the laws of, let's say, political physics. It is not possible. And we need to snap out of thinking of Russia as being immune to these forces that every other regime on earth, every other dictator in history has not been immune to. And of course, it's going to be interesting. Negotiations, though. Putin has shown no inclination for negotiations whatsoever. He's shown no inclination to give up his desire to entirely dominate, conquer, and even erase Ukraine, including at the St. Petersburg Forum. While they're busy trying to attract foreign investment, Putin comes on stage and tells the combined investors, one, that Ukraine is not real and that it's the same thing as Russia, thereby we're going to lay claim to the whole country. And secondly, he tells these foreign investors, and the Taliban, of course, who were there, that wherever Russian military boots have been, wherever Russian soldiers have been historically, that is our territory. Well, Russians have been in Berlin, Russians have been in Paris. So, on the one hand, come and invest. On the other hand, yeah, we're going to take your countries. It's madness. There's no rationality there actually at all, even within the traditional framework of Russian imperialism. So I don't think he's serious about negotiation. But what he does want to do, because he may feel that this is his last shot of the dice of taking Ukraine, he's going to want to hold the Ukrainian allies and especially the US at bay for a little bit longer while he makes a final push. That means devastating drone strikes on Ukrainian cities, and that means he's going to amass what troops he has for a final push along the sort of southern and eastern fronts. And there's evidence of that happening. Sersky's been talking about 111,000 troops massing down in the Pokrovsk direction. We had a massing of troops in Sumy, but they didn't break through again because they're using, these crude meat wave attacks. Negotiations, I think, are a distraction, and this is the third round of distraction to try and convince Trump and others, Rubio, that they're serious about negotiations and they're not. And they want the US to put pressure on Ukraine not to have any Operation Spiderweb, not to strike back against Russian logistics on the territory of Russia. This is what they want. Stop the strikes on oil. Don't touch our grey fleet, etc., etc., etc. It's just another distraction so Putin can scale up his aggression. It, the US may be taken in by that, but I don't think militarily it's going to work because it hasn't worked, in the last 3.5 years.
I agree with you. The fact is, I don't think that Vladimir Putin actually wants to enter peace talks right now. I don't think he's a
No.
sincere actor in this. And quite clearly, he doesn't understand how bad of a state his economy is in. As you point out, look at the diversity of his statements. Come invest in Russia, and at the same time, talking about their imperialism and rejoicing in their imperialism, which is very hard to find in new investors. But at the same time, I think that the Russian economy might take away the decision from him. You remember in late 1916, especially in the beginning of 1917, there was millions of Russians who just dropped their guns and ran, or very often took their guns with them from the front, killed their officers, and then went to the cities to create mob chaos. So we've seen historically in Russia sometimes when their leader decides that he wants to be in a war and the citizens don't want to be there anymore because the economy has collapsed, the wars can end very quickly. And it ends very badly, as Nicholas II found out, for the leader of the country at that time. But either way, listen, it was great talking with you today. I appreciate your time.
Jason, thank you so much.